Hey, you've joined the Wednesday edition of the Frank Figliuzzi Show, and I'm going to introduce my special guest, Frank Figliuzzi. There we are. Look, we have so much news to cover, and you know my approach to this, right? I usually do this on what I call Frank Fridays, but today there has been so much accumulated news that we're going to forego the guest, and we're going to talk about what isn't covered enough or at all in this crazy news cycle. So you're getting kind of the Frank filter as to what I'm finding needs to be covered more, and we're going to hit all the topics that I think you need to know. Let's go with the breaking news of last night's Florida primary. You know, I don't consider myself a political analyst. I'm not. I like to say that this world we're living in transcends politics. I see it as a threat and risk picture. And so to the extent that the primaries recently are reflecting more threat or less threat or risk, that's where I come in. So look, a couple of interesting things happening. Over the course of the past month alone, in various primaries, 6 Trump-endorsed candidates have lost their primaries. 6. Now, that doesn't mean that the dam's breaking, but it is cracking, folks. And people are starting to make their own decisions absent what MAGA is telling them to do. This happened certainly last night in Florida with some mixed results, but it's also happened, elsewhere. I love the fact we've got up on the screen that Trump endorsed Corey Mills, who, by the way, is accused of assaulting a woman, and another woman has filed a restraining order against him. He endorsed Corey Mills, and of course, in typical Trump fashion, what are we seeing today? We see this Truth Social. Well, basically, I'll paraphrase. I endorsed the guy, but I didn't really want to, and I told him to drop out of the race, right? He does not like losing, and he's lost at least 6 times in the past month in endorsed candidates. We know that Mike Lindell lost, and he's denying his own loss. That's hysterical. Trump-endorsed candidates fell in governor's races in Iowa and Georgia. His initial pick for governor of South Carolina, his initial pick anyway, has lost. We'll get to South Carolina in a minute. But I want to take, for me, the perhaps the biggest takeaway in Florida, and that is over the course of the last couple of years, I've had my eyes focused on this group of so-called moms that are very much MAGA aligned. They're based in Florida, and they've been responsible for most of the book banning in libraries, particularly school libraries, but also your local community library across the country. And that is Moms for Liberty. Moms for Liberty, which could not be any less for liberty, because they're against freedom, they're for censorship. And if you start scratching, some fascinating investigative work has been done on communities and schools throughout the country who've banned books, some of them classics. I mean, Catcher in the Rye, Anne Frank's Diary has been banned in some places because, it's unpleasant. And we wouldn't want to scare the children with reality. Well, guess what? When you trace all that book banning, what you trace it to is literally a couple of members of Moms for Liberty who file all of the paperwork to get books banned. Well, guess what? In Sarasota, Florida, the school board, and you say, Frank, are we watching school board elections? Yes, I am. Yes, I am, because the winner gets to write history and read history. And that's what we need to look at. So 2 former teachers, imagine that, former teachers running for school board, shocking. 2 former teachers defeated conservatives in the Sarasota school board race, flipping the board where a conservative majority has held sway since 2022. That, folks, is huge news and probably not getting covered enough. And it's big news for Florida, big news that someone's realizing this is craziness with regard to Sarasota. And if you don't know, Sarasota has become a hotbed for all the MAGA lunatics and crazies to buy homes and set up their offices. They've literally taken over Sarasota. Last night, I think we're seeing the first signs of pushback with a little old school board election. So that leaves two new sane people who've been teachers on the school board, and they're going to join incumbents already on the board that are a former school counselor and a businessman. So that's a five-member board that now has flipped towards sanity, something we could be seeing across the country. All right, so that's going to be the extent of my political coverage because, I'm the national security guy. Speaking of national security, we've got to cover some of the latest Iran news, some of it crazy, some of it really scary. All right, I want to talk first about something that's not entirely getting focused on in terms of threat and risk, which is, yes, we're all aware of the abysmal conditions aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln. Some of the families, mostly anonymously because they fear retribution of their sailor aboard the ship, but we're all aware of the horrible conditions, mold and mildew and lack of sanitary and hygiene items, including soap, toothpaste, toilet paper, and shampoo. But there's a couple of aspects I want to point out that certainly are never going to get told to you by the Trump administration and may not be covered by mainstream media. First, if you're thinking, well, okay, I get it. They've been at sea for too long and they aren't getting their supplies. Folks, we need to ask why they aren't getting their supplies. It's not because they've been in one place for too long. It's because Iran has successfully damaged the supply bases in that region, U.S. bases and supply depots, where all of this stuff gets stocked up, are so damaged and even in some cases evacuated that those goods are not getting to the sailors aboard the Abraham Lincoln. And why wouldn't Trump want to admit that? Because he doesn't want to admit the real damage that's been done to our infrastructure. Not only are we depleted in terms of munitions, but the ability to resupply and have forward staging operating areas and bases in the region is also severely diminished. That's number one. Number two, while we're all perhaps pleased to hear that the folks aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln are going to get some relief soon because the USS George Washington carrier group, right, is on its way as we speak. It's moving toward the Lincoln to allow that to get some respite, but that's not without consequences. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and here's the threat and risk of moving the USS George Washington, that is the only carrier group. And remember, it's a group. When aircraft carriers don't operate all by themselves, they have friends, and they come as an entourage with other ships, helicopters, special operators. Right? We all move together. And guess what? To move that to relieve the Lincoln, we're going to leave the Pacific Theater without a U.S. carrier group. And let me assure you, the Chinese are looking at this closely and wondering, is this the moment where U.S. munitions have been depleted? They're focused almost entirely on the Middle East. They're pulling the George Washington out. Is this the time for China to make a move on Taiwan? And would Trump do anything about it? And here's my, you get what you pay for. Here's my opinion. Trump wouldn't do a darn thing right now because in part, he cannot. He cannot. We are truly depleted in terms of our munitions. And his recent bluster about, I'm going to blast Iran, I'm going to re-escalate, that was called off in part because we don't have the missiles to do it. We don't have the missiles to do it. And now he's stopped talks with Iran. He's called timeout. Folks, we are vulnerable, and we are, I continue to say, in many arenas, we are more vulnerable than we were on the eve of 9/11. So keep your eye on China, keep your eye on Taiwan and the Pacific, and we're going to see I predict once the George Washingtons cleared that theater, we're going to see China do some really provocative things. Watch and see what China tests in the next few weeks. Similarly, since we're going to talk about the Strait of Hormuz, why not a vacation plan for perhaps surfing or wakeboarding in the Strait of Hormuz? Since Trump is telling us, there it is right there. Looks like a lovely area. There's a few mines that we would have to deal with, but it's a challenge. Bring the kids. They'll love surfboarding. Why am I saying that? Because Trump just recently, and we have a clip of it, is saying that he's taking the Strait of Hormuz as U.S. territory. So this is the new Greenland. Hormuz is the new Greenland. Orange is the new black. Hormuz is the new Greenland. Let's hear from our president telling us that we own the Strait of Hormuz now, which is fantasy land.
And leave by Canada. Yeah. The Strait, last night we had a lot of boats come through. We have possession, complete control of the Strait. I mean, outside of nuisance value, and there is nuisance value when they shoot a drone every once in a while, and not everybody's going to go through, but they come through. And over the last couple of weeks, we've had a lot of oil coming out, a lot of oil. It's not going to be perfect, but it's a lot of oil coming out, a lot. In fact, people are amazed. One of the reasons that oil hasn't gone to like the proverbial $300 a barrel, it's at 83, 84, 85. And it'll be a lot lower when this is over because we have plenty of oil. But one of the reasons it never went into 3 and 350 numbers because we have a lot coming in.
Gosh, I feel so much better, don't you? Look, if you haven't learned by now, I've certainly learned. When the more Trump emphasizes something, the more the opposite is true. It's nonsense to think that a lot of oil is coming through the Strait of Hormuz. It's not. And the real reason why our oil prices haven't gone to $300 a barrel is because we are depleting the U.S. oil reserves. I mean, it is almost on empty. The gas tank is reading E for empty on U.S. oil reserves to a dangerous level. So to continue the gas tank analogy, when your car, particularly when you were a kid and you first got your license, maybe your parents told you, keep that car at least a quarter or half full, because if you drain that gas tank and go to empty, you can actually, especially true back then, you can actually damage your engine, the equipment in there that pumps the gas. You don't want that exposed. It's happening right now where we store our U.S. oil reserves. We have drained them. And you may not know this, but U.S. oil reserves in large part are kept in caverns and salt mines under the ground. And what experts are telling us right now is that we are at the lowest point. We keep dipping into these reserves. They're supposed to be for emergencies. And those caverns and that equipment that pumps the oil up out of those caverns was designed for no more than 5 dips into the reserve. And here's what happens, not only to the equipment, which burns out if it's exposed, but also the walls of those salt caverns are eroded every time we start draining the oil reserve. And what experts are telling us is that those caverns are going to begin to collapse without the supporting counter pressure from the oil reserves. And because every time the oil level drops in those caverns, the walls start to collapse and reserve. This is danger, folks. And our allies know it. We're not getting enough coverage of that for sure. I've got some of the data on how bad the oil situation is getting. Here we go. Strategic oil inventories have reached a 40-year low, and experts warn their continued depletion could damage the underground caverns where the reserves are stored. Pumping water into the 60 salt caverns to force oil to the surface dissolves the salt walls, flattening the roofs of the caverns and thinning the structural pillars separating adjacent caves. The storage sites were originally engineered for only 5 complete drawdown cycles, but decades of frequent partial extractions have heavily strained the aging infrastructure. It's going to risk equipment failure or permanent geological damage. So don't buy the lies that many ships full of oil are coming through the strait. They are not. Any rescue we've had so far on oil prices is coming because we keep releasing strategic reserves. And apparently no one can tell Trump, or no one gets it, or he won't listen to anyone, that we're literally running out of oil. So we're running out of munitions to protect ourselves. We're running out of oil to keep America going. I wish I had better news on that, but I do not. Similarly, in terms of repercussions of the Iran situation, we have what is looking like apparent revenge by Trump against South Korea. So he tells a story of him on the phone with the leader of South Korea, and he wanted South Korea to help us with Iran. South Korea allegedly said, no, thank you. And Trump allegedly is pissed and said, hey, we got 39,000 U.S. troops poised on the border with North Korea to protect you. And you're saying no to us. You know what I'm going to do? 2 things. I'm going to greatly curtail the planned military exercises. These happen all the time, folks. We practice with our allies. It was planned for like now, and Trump's asked Hegseth to cut that way back, as seemingly sending a message to South Korea, hey, we're not going to help you. I want to take us behind that headline, though, folks. And here's a stomach churning photo we've got up. This is a bit older, when Trump visited the demilitarized zone, and here comes a salute. I'll be damned if I will ever salute a North Korean general who is actually offering his hand, because even the North Korean general knows it can't be that a U.S. president is trying to salute me. But yes, it can. And now, as of yesterday, we're learning that Trump is back to praising Kim Jong Un, saying I get along with him great. I don't know what the problem is. Why are we doing the military exercises with South Korea when Kim Jong Un is behaving himself? And here's a headline for you. This comes from this morning. This is so typical of Trump fawning over some dictator, and the dictator telling him basically, F you. This is happening with Putin, and now it's happening with Kim Jong Un. We've got a headline this morning that Kim Jong Un has said to Trump, yeah, that cancellation of the exercises with South Korea, that's nothing. That doesn't do enough for me. Folks, this is a global embarrassment. A global embarrassment that Putin toys with Trump, and now Kim Jong Un is saying, you can fawn over me. You can try to appease me by canceling the exercises with South Korea. It's not enough. We are a global embarrassment. And more importantly, the national security risk of all of this, North Korea, China, and Russia communicate with each other regularly. So all the topics we just discussed, we're running out of munitions, we're running out of oil, we're moving the USS George Washington carrier group out of the Pacific. You don't think that's being discussed at the highest military levels across China, North Korea, and Russia? I guarantee you it is, based on my past experience. Okay, but the good news is we own the Strait of Hormuz, and hopefully some resorts will be set up there. Maybe our kids can help remove the underwater mines that have been placed there. Unbelievable. I want to move on to another topic as we bounce around the news. And we talk about cracks in the MAGA armor, and we look for glimpses of any bipartisan agreement on anything to cling to as hope. Well, in the news, in the last 24 hours or so, we're clearly seeing more GOP leaders joining the ranks of Democratic leaders who are questioning data centers in their communities, right? This is NIMBY, not in my backyard, on steroids. And the fact that we're seeing red states like Texas, like Governor Abbott in Texas, a staunch MAGA Trump supporter in what traditionally has been a red state, I think they're turning purple. Abbott is not stupid. Abbott sees the writing on the wall. He's got a problem in his state. Lots of big space to build data centers, lots of high-tech companies attracted to the state and already here, great tax incentives, all of that. And he's wondering whether it's actually going to impact Republicans' chances of winning elections in November. People are outraged, rightly, wrongly. It almost doesn't matter at this point. It has become a standalone political issue that crosses party lines. So on top of that, we now learn, and I believe it's from Axios, yes, that there's been an internal memo. I used to hate it when I was in the FBI and I heard the press got a hold of an internal memo. I used to start to sweat. Now I like it. So, but this is a Republican, a Senate GOP campaign arm has lost a private memo, and it went to Axios. The private memo was written to top AI companies, warning them that what they call toxic views of U.S. data centers, it's become toxic to what? To winning elections. The memo says, hey, you guys are killing the party's chances of holding a vital seat, in this case, in Ohio. In Ohio, another state that could go against the Republicans, and AI and data centers could be a large part of it. In the memo, the National Republican Senatorial Committee says Democrats have made data centers a, quote, centerpiece of their campaign to defeat John Husted, Republican from Ohio, and that the strategy is working. If he loses, here's a quote, if he loses and data centers get the blame, politicians across the country will take notice, and they will not go near the next data center, says the memo. This is becoming a sleeper issue for the entire election cycle, unquote. So this is where, I've had, you may have seen, and if you haven't, I had a show where we brought on, you can find it as you scroll through Substack. We brought on an expert, an academic expert, to teach us more about data centers, right? And the bottom line is we've got to regulate. We've got to get better at understanding their value. Yes, China's moving fast ahead of us. Yes, we cannot just totally say we want no progress, no data centers. That's just actually going to harm us. But boy, do we need regulation, understanding, promises about clean water, noise, pollution, real jobs, not the promise of, we're going to get you 100 jobs in your community that are going to be staring at the wall, making sure that they don't press any buttons. That's not real jobs. It's not. We got to get to the bottom of that and differentiate between old, loud, polluting data centers and the new phase of data centers and have states demand that. But when somebody like Governor Abbott or some group like the Senate GOP campaign arm is getting worried about Ohio, getting worried about Texas, getting worried about losing an election because of data centers and their perception, we need to pay attention to that. And maybe it's a strategy to get people to start thinking about the right things and voting for the right people who want to do the right thing for data centers. Why not plug my own? Sean, our producer, has reminded me that the guest, if you want to learn more about data centers and look for the show and look for his own work, the guest we had on recently was Michael Bennett, University of Illinois, Chicago. He's actually one of the deans or leaders at Illinois, Chicago. And he takes a kind of non-political, straight up academic approach to here's what databases are, here's what they're not. Check out the show if you want to learn more. Speaking of checking things out, as you may know, I write a column every week for Lincoln Square. Comes out on Wednesday to go with this Wednesday show. My column this week was one of the easiest ones I've written. By that, I mean, I didn't wring my hands over topics. I didn't have to carefully consider the right position. This week's column, out today, is about electric shock gloves and ICE. And actually, DHS writ large. They're going to be in the hands, no pun intended. They're going to be there's the column headline. ICE intends to acquire, and we've learned this through good old-fashioned journalism, by the way. This is reporters scouring government acquisition documents. Imagine what you can find if you have the wherewithal to scour all the acquisition documents where the government's looking to buy something. In this case, reporters found upwards of $20 million intended to acquire electric shock gloves produced by a little business in, I think it's called Nicholasville, Kentucky. This will be, it seems, their very first federal contract. It's no bid, folks, unless the Congress moves in and stops this. This could be an up to $20 million no bid contract to a small firm in Kentucky. And what do they make? They make gloves that can be activated with the press of a button that will deliver 380 volts of electricity to someone if you touch their skin with the glove. So, I'm not going to give away my whole column, but I'm going to say that after 25 years in law enforcement, I was always fascinated by what we call less than lethal options. If we can avoid shooting someone and de-escalating a situation, all for it. Tasers, pepper spray. How about good old-fashioned talking and negotiating? But let me tell you something, and this is why the column was easy for me to write. There is nothing about putting electric shock gloves on the hands of ICE agents that can credibly be called de-escalation. It's quite the opposite, folks. Why do I say that? Because in the hands of the right folks, so these gloves are, you might say, are these brand new? Are they not anywhere? They are used mostly in institutional settings. So you already have an unarmed inmate, presumably, or detainee. They're totally out of control, and you want instant compliance. They're used there. They're used, very controversial, but they are currently used by some school police officers at the middle school and high school level to avoid ever having to take their weapon out, their gun, and shoot a student. And if the student is out of control, and there's no de-escalation left. They are used there. But folks, ICE and DHS writ large, and this would go to Border Patrol, HSI, ERO, and ICE, all the three-letter agencies under DHS, and they have proven to us over and over again that they are incapable of using force reasonably. And make no mistake about it, every police department that already has these gloves, and there's not a lot, absolutely labels them as use of force. Okay, it's not. This isn't a no police department thinks this is a de-escalation technique. This is when everything else has hit the fan. You've tried your distancing, you've tried your talking, and now you're facing a physical threat from the subject, and you want to activate this glove and try to disable the person temporarily so you can handcuff them. All of that, to the reasonable law enforcement mind, sounds okay, right? If it's in the right hands and if there are repercussions. So those police departments I just talked about, they call it use of force, and that means they require the officer to report the use immediately, and they treat it as an investigative mandate. It's like you shot somebody. There has to be an investigation. Do you think for a second that ICE is going to get properly trained, even from the manufacturer's suggestions? I've read the manual, folks, from the manufacturer. You can go online and look at it. The caveats are: don't use on a child, don't use on a pregnant woman, don't use on the elderly, don't use on the medically compromised. ICE cannot even accurately identify the targeted person in their operation. They have shot and killed people who they later have to admit, after lying, that, that person was not actually the target of our operation. That applies to Lorenzo Salgado Arroyo in Houston. It applies to the young 26-year-old father up in Biddeford, Maine. Oh, yeah, no, he wasn't the guy we were going after. Sorry, we shot him, killed him. How are they supposed to identify the person who's medically compromised, pregnant? Come on. And do you think, I would be all for this if the premise wasn't false. The false premise here is this is going to replace shooting and killing someone. I'd rather get the electric shock than the bullet. Of course, that makes perfect sense, but not for this DHS. Not when we know that they go right to hands-on. There is no talking. We've seen it. We've seen the smashed car window in traffic over and over again. We've seen the innocent person pulled out of their vehicle. We've seen the old man dragged out the front door in freezing weather. They don't have the training. We've seen, if you think this would have stopped the death of Alex Preddy, the protester, the nurse at the VA, was on his knees and disarmed per video evidence when he was shot and killed. How would the glove have changed that? The glove would have put him down on his knees and helped officers to disarm him. He already was, and they shot him anyway. So read the column and see if you're going to get as incensed as I am. And don't forget, ICE has promised to deploy body cameras on all their agents for a long time now, and we're getting played. Oh, we'll have them by the end of September. Oh, well, it's the training. Oh, it's the Democrats not giving us the money. Every time Tom Homan goes on the air and says it's Democrats' fault that we don't have the cameras deployed. That's not true, folks. They can deploy them. And then and if you think that's going to get us more transparency, even transparency as to how they use these electric gloves someday, no. What has ICE actually said in a formal statement? We will then release the body cam footage when it serves our best interest. oh no. So we got no body cameras. We have no insight into what goes on with the body, even when the body camera is turned on. And now, allegedly, as soon as March, these agents will have the ability to put 380 volts through somebody. And by the way, what happens when 2 or 3 agents, like in the Alex Preddy case, have hands on, and they all decide in the heat of the moment to turn their gloves on, and someone is now getting 380 times 3 volts? We're going to see fatalities, folks. We are. Yep, we are. So I don't think this is de-escalation at all. My 2 cents there, based on my experience. I want to stay on ICE because it's a topic that I think is really important, because essentially we are talking about Trump's secret police in many ways. You may not know, but the nominee to be the new head of ICE is a former senior executive at the Oklahoma Highway Patrol. Do I think the Oklahoma Highway Patrol is a fine organization? Yeah, probably. Do I think that one of their leaders is well positioned and knowledgeable to run a federal law enforcement agency? I do not. But here's one of his claims to fame and what attracts him to Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen at DHS. First, they're both from Oklahoma, folks. Number one. Number two, this guy, Lance Schroyer is his name. When he was at Oklahoma State Patrol, deputized his state troopers as ICE agents. Yes. Where do you think this is going? He has made statements that, hey, there's no way ICE can meet all of their quotas, cannot grab up all the people they're supposed to grab up without the help of local law enforcement. I guarantee you what's coming. We're going to see a move afoot. It's already started for mass deputization of state and county police officers as federal agents to serve in the deportation process. It's going to be very controversial. It's already controversial in places like Houston, Texas, where the mayor has tried to, please two masters. He's got Governor Abbott in Austin, who kind of controls purse strings, right, for cities in Texas. Then he's got the electorate saying, why am I being pulled over for a traffic stop and I have to wait half an hour because I have brown skin and ICE needs to show up and look at me? Why is that happening? And so cities right now are wrestling with this. And I don't think ICE has even deputized, I don't think the city of Houston has even deputized as officers, but there's still controversy happening. Governor Abbott certainly wants county and state police to be involved in the deportation process as well. It's a big mess, but it will become even bigger as the former senior executive at Oklahoma Highway Patrol becomes the head of ICE, unless he does not. Another topic in the news that isn't getting enough, some of it is coverage, is the successful pushback on Trump administration conduct in the form of civil lawsuits. If you've been following me for, moving on 9 years now, you've heard me say that despite the fact that I'm a federal law enforcement guy and I like criminal prosecution, I think civil lawsuits are incredibly effective. It hits your pocket. It hits your shareholders, your stock price. And we're seeing more and more the successful use of lawsuits. Now, since we're on the topic of Texas, let's talk about Harris County. That's Houston area, massive, heavily populated county in Texas. Houston, as you know, is the 4th largest city in America. The county just goes on forever. Harris and El Paso counties are suing the Trump administration over a new effort to withhold millions of dollars in anti-terrorism funding. We've talked about this threat, right? That if you don't get your act together as per Trump's mandates and turn over your voter records and do what we tell you. And by the way, Trump doesn't like Harris County nor El Paso County. They don't vote the right way. And he wants change. And so he's withholding their anti-terrorism grant money. As I've said before, he's not withholding highway funds. He's not withholding health funds and grants, which barely exist anyway. He's deliberately deciding to endanger these communities that rely on this grant money to keep their citizens safe. It is, folks, an apparent strategy to make those non-compliant cities and counties less safe and more vulnerable to crime, violence, and yes, even terrorism. These are anti-terrorism funds we're talking about, folks. This is bad stuff. And I like the fact that the counties are saying, you know what? We're suing. We're suing over this. And folks, Congress has allotted this money. And I believe the lawsuits will show that he can't do this and that this is revenge and it's dangerous. He doesn't control the purse strings like he thinks he does. Okay, I want to go on to another lawsuit that, yes, did get a lot of coverage yesterday because TV likes to cover TV. So you know likely that ABC, which is owned by Disney, has decided to sue the Federal Communications Commission, Trump's FCC, for suppressing free speech by threatening the license renewal process around ABC TV affiliates across the country. Good on ABC. They have had enough. We've all had enough. And you remember ABC, just one example, Jimmy Kimmel has the late night show, which, by the way, this week is being hosted. Jimmy Kimmel's on vacation. It's being hosted by Rosie O'Donnell. She's doing a great job, and it must make Trump livid. He watches. He's up all night. And now he's got to turn on ABC late night and see not just Jimmy Kimmel, but Rosie O'Donnell. It's funny, and it's not funny. And if you know, ABC is actually owned by the powerhouse Disney. It's amazing how much Disney owns. They own ESPN. They own ABC. And of course, all the Disney products and platforms, including now Hulu, very powerful. And for this kind of powerful entity to say enough, we are literally suing a presidential administration, I think is the way to go. And I think will empower other networks and platforms to do the same thing. Trump needs to understand there will be consequences. There will be pushback. I applaud the lawsuit. I'm a champion of free speech. As someone who has been sued for my free speech, yes, I'm a champion of that. What I'm not a champion of, moving along, is our new Attorney General, Todd Blanche, and what he's doing. Have you heard this? To put guns back in the hands of people who aren't supposed to have guns. Yes, you heard that right. Blanche has announced a program to give felons back their guns because, Second Amendment, the only amendment that many Americans ever heard of. Ask them about the First Amendment, the Fourth and Fifth and Sixth Amendment, and see if they can give you anything. They can quote chapter and verse, maybe, about the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. What's the story? For decades now, people convicted of certain violent felonies and many other felonies were not permitted to continue to possess guns or purchase new guns. Todd Blanche says that's a violation of the Second Amendment. Everybody should have a gun. He wants to look at that. He wants to allow people to petition to get their guns back. Now, you could always petition to get your guns back, but the reality was, under most sane administrations, you weren't getting the gun back. And if you know Liz Oyer, who, by the way, was at a dinner with me in Washington, D.C. last weekend, who was the former pardon attorney at DOJ, who's doing some great work on online now on social media. She'll tell you the story of actor Mel Gibson, who had convictions, charges involving a number of things, including domestic violence. And DOJ said, hey, the rules say no gun for you, Mel Gibson. Sorry. And the apparent orders came from the White House, someone in power, telling DOJ, no, give Mel Gibson back his gun. Now, imagine this happening by the thousands or tens of thousands in terms of people who had their gun rights taken from them, validly so, and now will be allowed to petition to get their guns back. Trump loves this idea and has spoken out publicly about it. His base wants this, but, you know, for your neighbors and colleagues who say, look, Second Amendment, sacrosanct. It's not. It's not. The courts have held over and over again that the government has the right to regulate gun possession. And this, again, will result in some lawsuits, and we'll hear about it. But since 1992, folks, the ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Unit, Bureau, has been barred from processing applications from people who should not have guns. And now that's going to be lifted. And gee, do you think the January 6th convicted felons are going to get their guns back? You bet they are. You bet they are. Do I sound conspiratorial if I say that part of this move is to essentially arm a violent militia group that's already proven they'll risk their lives for Trump? I don't think it's too conspiratorial at all. They wanted the slush fund to give them millions of dollars, and that is kind of on hold. But why not let them have their guns back? That's where this is headed, folks. You heard it here first. Don't be surprised if you see January 6 convicts getting their guns back. Chris Brown, the president of Brady, what a great organization on gun safety and enforcement, said her group's still reviewing the administration's final rule, but has stressed the need for robust and thoughtful systems that minimize the risk to public safety. Boy, there's an understatement. My Lord. All right. I love this quote from Brady and Chris Brown. Let's go ahead and read it. Yet the Trump administration has consistently shown us they have no such discretion, including by restoring gun rights to convicted domestic abusers and violent January 6 insurrectionists, and by tirelessly rolling back broad policies proven to prevent crime and gun violence. Look, those January 6 offenders have reoffended, some of them even in sexual assaults against children, some of them assaulting police officers again, and now we're going to possibly rearm them. It is outrageous. That's why I like to end always with a good news story. It was tough to find one this week, folks, but I have one. And since we've talked about Texas, let's do it again. You may be aware that Big Bend National Park, one of the crown jewels in the national park system, was facing the building of the wall right through a U.S. section of Big Bend, including the invocation of sovereign rights, where eminent domain is the word I was looking for. Got it? Eminent domain, where the government seizes your property. How do Republicans feel about the government seizing their property? You think they're happy about that in Texas, so that you can build a wall through it? There has been such a stink raised about the disfigurement of Big Bend National Park, coupled with eminent domain seizure of Texas properties, and the fact that some weird configuration of this wall, if it's built, would actually potentially place Americans' property on the other side of the wall, on the Mexican side of the wall, theoretically. People are livid. And guess who is very upset again with Trump? Governor Greg Abbott. The cracks are occurring. And what has happened? The good news for the day, and we'll close on it. U.S. Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Rodney Scott announced on Monday that he was temporarily pausing all construction activity in Texas' scenic Big Bend National Park amid fierce bipartisan backlash to the planned border infrastructure. Quote, "Last night I put a pause on all activity in that park as far as construction goes until I can get down there and do a personal evaluation." Cracks in the armor, folks. Republicans upset with Trump and the regime. Stay tuned for that. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you Friday on Frank Friday. Thanks.